Hello, friends. Welcome to Wired X. Here today with Remedy Live and the Lutheran Foundation. So grateful that you could join us. I've just noticed that we had a YouTube error. So, like in all things, whenever I start these events, I make sure to let you know that technology isn't always our friend. I hope that today it will be. As we engage in this webinar about the importance of talking about mental health during Mental Health Awareness Month. And we could not do these things without the wonderful partnership that we have with the Lutheran Foundation. And I actually have Dennis Goff with me here today. So Dennis, I'm going to put you up there and you can... Dennis, can you just maybe send us off into this experience and talk to us a little bit about why the Lutheran Foundation is so passionate about this conversation?
Thanks, Clinton. I really do appreciate you. I appreciate Remedy Live, appreciate the partnership that we have together and the opportunity that the Lutheran Foundation has to lift up mental wellness and try to eliminate the stigma associated with mental illness. And this is May, Mental Health Awareness Month, and so the Lutheran Foundation wants to give some visibility to that, some attention to that, to be engaged in the conversation. And as I thought about people that I wanted to reach out to during this month, you were natural to do that. And so I've gone through several of your events before, but I look forward to this one as well and what we all can learn together and how we can support one another in this journey of mental wellness. Thanks a lot, Clinton.
Thank you. So grateful for Dennis, for his friendship, his partnership in this endeavor. And really, that's really what this is about, is a partnership. It's a partnership with you, with parents, with youth workers, with church leaders. We cannot do what we do talking to our children, to our students, without learning that we're a village. We're doing this together. And that's how we lower the stigma. And I think it might be important for us just to mention, too, that today, I'm just a normal everyday guy. I am not here today as a mental health expert. I'm not a clinician. I am purely trying to do my part as a person in this endeavor to talk about that which we oftentimes don't talk about, the things that we oftentimes maybe think that we shouldn't speak of because we don't have the information, we don't have the expertise. And I think that's kind of why, in some cases, we find ourselves so institutionalized around the topic of mental health rather than just the practical, because we all have mental health. We all have these things. And so what I want to do is I want to jump into some trivia time. And if you've ever been part of our events before, you know that we've done some things where we have a lot of interaction and time together where we experience different giveaways and making sure that we have a good time. And so as you look at your screen, and I just want to be clear, I'm pushing a lot of buttons here. And so I'm kind of running this whole show kind of on my own today. And so as you look at the screen, you may notice that you've got some options there on the right-hand side. And I want to kind of give you an idea here of how this works. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. And as you answer the questions, you'll have a chance to be able to earn some rewards. Perhaps I'm going to kind of show you how that works. The animation that you have on the screen kind of gives you an idea that as the question pops up there on the screen, you can indeed answer those questions and have a chance to be able to respond. And when you respond to those questions, you also, of course, as you get points, you can win the trivia contest, and that's going to allow you to have a little reward code option pop up there. You do not need to type in your email if you don't want the reward, but this is just another fun way that we can make it normal to talk about mental health, to make it absolutely normal to have a conversation about what we all have, and that's, of course, the importance of this brain inside of our head staying healthy. And so my hope is that you'll have a good time with this. And so I'm going to get these questions started here in a second. I got 5 questions for you to start us off. These are going to help kind of teach us as we go on this conversation again today. So I'm going to push the first one out. Again, you'll see the questions pop up there on the screen, and so go ahead and answer them as quickly as you can. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to give you a chance to be able to answer those questions. And at the end of those questions, you're going to have a chance to see if you can get the reward code. So let's start off with our first question here. You can see that up there on the screen. In the U.S., what percentage of our U.S. adults experience mental illness each year? Is it A4, B5, C6, or D7? And I'm giving you 20 seconds to do this here today, but the reality is that you've probably answered quickly and correctly, and that's the way you get the most points. And believe it or not, the answer to that is 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. And that's an important part of our conversation today. Believe it or not, this is a very, very common issue for us to struggle. And of course, I don't need to tell you that. Most of you are coming to us in the context of a faith community, and you know that struggle is a part of our daily lives. But oftentimes when we struggle with mental health issues, we struggle in secret, we struggle in silence. And that's why we're doing this very important event here today. So it looks like Tower 2299, if that's you, looks like you are at the top of the leaderboard. So let's keep going. Our next question here, 1 in blank U.S. youth aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. 1 in blank U.S. youth. What do you think the blank is? Is it 6? Is it 9? Is it 11? Or is it 13? What do you think the answer is? Today we're going to talk about children. We're going to talk about youth. But we're going to talk mostly about you as the caregivers to these kids. You as youth workers, you as children's workers, you as people that are involved in kids' lives, parents, of course. And today, believe it or not, 1 in 9 U.S. youth aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. And so such an important conversation because those represent real children that we have relationship with. And so we're so excited to be able to have this conversation. Tower continues to retain the spot here at the top of the leaderboard. Let's go to question 3. According to a January 2020 study by Cigna, what percentage of Americans are lonely? Loneliness is part of this conversation in some way when it comes to mental health. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But 42%, 60%, 73%, or 82%. What do you think the answer is there? Again, loneliness has been talked about a lot, especially during this time of COVID-19 and social isolation. And believe it or not, 60% of Americans are lonely. That's staggering when you think about that. That's nearly 2 out of 3 Americans struggle with some form of loneliness when it comes to dealing with their day-to-day. And as we talk about this a little bit later on, you'll see how that loneliness is connected to our overall mental health. Well, let's keep going. Another question here. Studies have concluded that chronic loneliness, back to that topic of loneliness, increases our risk of an early death. Wow. By what percent? Studies have concluded that chronic loneliness increases our risk of an early death by what percent? Is it 5%? Is it 14%? Is it 19%? Or is it 23%? We're created for community. We were created to be in relationships. And at 14%, believe it or not, your increase of early death increases by 14% if indeed you are struggling with loneliness. And so this is again, today, as we talk about students and children, I know it's so easy to say, well, what would they be lonely about? They've got all kinds of people, all kinds of social media, all kinds of gaming systems, all kinds of stuff. And yet, do we really know what it means to have a significant, important, deep relationship with one another? So, got one more question. We'll see if Tower can continue to retain the top there. So go ahead and try to fill in the blank. Blank is when someone sees you in a negative way because of your mental illness. Is it prejudice? Is it discrimination? Is it stigma? Or is it avoidance? Now, we could probably justify that some of those answers are true, but the word that we're using today and the word that we're seeing so often used when it comes to breaking the stigma, there's the hint, breaking the stigma is why we're doing this event today, to bring mental health awareness to this conversation. And so grateful for the opportunity to serve you here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of a break. Congratulations, I believe Tower won that contest. So Tower, you should be seeing a reward code on your screen here in a little bit. And so go ahead and fill that out if indeed you want to be able to retain some prize, some award from Remedy Live. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually play a little video that shows a little bit more about Remedy Live and what we do and the programs that we have here to be able to serve not only our community, but of course the United States as a whole.
So what is Remedy Live? Well, we get people talking about the things that we don't talk about. Our method centers around using technology to engage people around what we call the secret struggle. That is, something in our life that we're not talking about, but something that's inflicting pain due to its isolating nature. Through technologies we've created, like our live chat software and interactive polling platform, we've been able to engage teens and adults alike in taking the first step to share their secret struggle if they have one. These methods allow for courage to be mustered to get the help they need, and in many cases, create important steps to talking more openly about what's been kept in secret. At Remedy Live, this happens every hour in our 24-hour chat center. Each year, thousands of people come who are caught in struggle or dealing with something that's overwhelming them. Our Soul Medic staff meets them where they're at, engaging each person in conversation after conversation, actively listening to their story while providing compassionate responses so people can see their lives as valuable and important. This has really led Remedy Live to get more involved in helping schools, businesses, and churches break the stigma surrounding mental health. With our Trends in Teens program, we're able to help parents understand how they can engage their kids. Our seasonal podcast focuses on trending topics, while our workshops visit groups on location to use interactive polling to talk about dangerous apps, mental health trends within schools, and other tips for parents. Our Get School Tour events bring the conversation about mental health to students in public schools by offering a high-energy, high-impact assembly program. Here we educate and invite students to open up through our live polls about what secret struggles they're facing, if any, while connecting them with the local network of care. And the newest resource at Remedy Live is our Wired Experiences. We go into organizations to share about mental health in the workplace, the church, or any place where people spend time. Using live polling, we're able to see where people may be thriving or struggling in their lives. And then, through interactive education and local partnerships, we can connect people that are hurting with resources that help them where they have a need. So that's it. Everything we do at Remedy Live is about the meaningful conversation, helping people know that their secret struggle shouldn't have the final say on their future. We're Remedy Live. We chat, we listen, and we love.
So I'm hoping that gives you a bit of a better idea as to what Remedy Live is. And it looks like a lot of you have seen or heard about Remedy Live before, so I'm grateful for that. But we are trying to serve all people. And we're really trying to help them have the meaningful conversations that I think we're going to have today. You know, as I look at our mission statement as an example, you know, we engage people in meaningful conversations through technology as a next step toward Christ. We want to show them the love of Jesus through being present during that difficult time, that secret struggle, those things that oftentimes we're up against, but we might feel like we're all alone in the midst of. And you may notice that the mission statement says people rather than what our mission statement said prior, that we were committed to helping youth. And we still are, of course, committed to helping youth, but we are now very committed to helping all people because we know that there are so many different people struggling at different life stages. And you're going to hear and learn today about the way that children are being affected with mental illness, that we're going to talk about how people of all ages and, of course, senior citizens with that loneliness factor that we talked about a little bit earlier. And so grateful again for your time today to participate in this event. Now, it's going to be important for me to kind of figure out who is with us today. And so, again, as you look at those options on the right-hand side of your screen, I want to see which best applies to you. Now, before you click the submit button at the bottom, there might be multiple buttons you have to click. So remember, you can do multiple options with some of these questions before you submit your answer. But I kind of want to know where you're coming from today. And as I look at your answers, it looks like we have a lot of others coming to us, and others are okay. You're welcome here. We did promote this to the pastors. We promoted this to children's workers, to youth workers, and of course to parents. But as I look at the breakdown here, I see a lot of us coming to talk today about the importance of focusing on younger kids and the influence we have in there. It doesn't look like we have, a couple children's workers, but we have some youth workers, and I'd be very interested to know what those others are that are represented there in our polling time. So throughout our conversation, we're going to have these questions pop up. I should share with you, just so you know, that everything I'm asking you today is completely anonymous. You may have noticed when you logged into the soulmediccentral.com event portal, the link that you received when you registered didn't even ask you for your email address or your name or your mobile phone number. This is purely an anonymous conversation. So we want you to be honest about these questions. And of course, throughout our time together, we're going to collect some information, but we're also going to be able to show us as a group today, just how we have so much in common when it comes to this conversation. So I'm going to push another question your way, and this is in regards to the children, the teens that you have relationship with. And I want you to think now, I know that, again, we're not experts, but how would you currently rate, as you think about those children, those kids, those tweens that you have relationship with, how would you, from an observation perspective, rate their overall mental health? And I know that's a general question, but you may be really concerned, and that's why you decided to join us today as you think about this. And this is kind of how you're looking at things. A lot of you would say that you believe a lot of the kids that you're interacting with are really dealing with some deep struggles. And then some of you, of course, realizing that some days are good, some days are bad, sometimes there is some struggle. But sadly, very few of you choosing C or D. And so you're aware, and maybe that was your motivation in joining us today for this conversation. And, shameless plug on my part, but what we're doing here today, this Wired X, is something we want to do for you. We want to do this for your church. We want to do this for your community, for your business. We have all kinds of wonderful relationships. This week I'll be doing a Wired X for Three Rivers, talking about the importance of talking to our children about mental health. Last week I served a group about relationships. The week before about screen time. We're committed to using technology to have meaningful conversations as a next step toward Christ. And so we would want to serve you if we can do that. Our goal today, just to make sure that we're clear and you showed up in the right place, is to encourage parents, youth workers, and children's workers on the importance of conversations regarding mental health. It is so important that we have conversations with the kids in our lives about this important topic. And again, stigma is almost like a barrier or a wall that keeps us sometimes from doing that. We feel uncomfortable, again, because we're not an expert. We feel uncomfortable because it's a conversation that maybe we're worried about the answers we might hear and the honesty that we might hear. And today I'm going to be sharing some resources that can help us kind of get going on that conversation in a very small and informal way, but a very important step for us as we have this dialogue. And I just feel like the most important thing that we're going to achieve today, and I'm so grateful for your willingness to participate, is just for me to encourage you to have that conversation. The question I just pushed to you, are you concerned that the kids you have relationships with are struggling with mental illness? And this is kind of a trick question, right? Because mental health is one thing, mental illness is another, and I'm going to talk about that throughout our time together. But as I look at your answers, it seems that many of you are deeply concerned that the children, the kids that you have relationships with, are struggling. And then that bottom, I'm not sure, that 20%, I would just say that this is why we're doing this. I would love tomorrow for you not to be able to click, I'm not sure, because you now know, because you've had a conversation with your child, you've had a conversation with your tween, with your teen. And so today's goal is to motivate you. If there's only one thing we do today, it's to motivate you to be part of removing the stigma, normalizing the conversation by having the conversation with the people that you love and that you care about. Remedy Live has been committed for almost a decade now to having this conversation about mental health, lowering that stigma, again, through mental health conversations, meaningful conversations. And I think it might be important as we jump further into this is to define mental health. And this is my own working definition. As I've worked with students and spent time hanging out with kids, it's been a fascinating thing because, we've in the year 2019, we had thousands of conversations with people all around the nation. And then at the same time, we were privileged to serve, 203 events with our Get Schooled Tour program and polled over 122,000 kids. And so this experience that we've had for the last decade doing this has helped us, again, to shape that definition of what we think mental health is. And I define it this way. It's how strong our brain is functioning at translating. That's an important word, translating the relationships, the circumstances, and our own perception of self amidst our day-to-day routine. And so let me just take a minute or two to break that down, what that means. First of all, that we have to understand circumstances are affecting our overall mental wellness. And my goodness, in the midst of COVID-19, all of us are being affected by that very unusual circumstance of social isolation and social distancing and staying at home and distance learning for our children. And those circumstances play havoc on the way the brain is translating self, identity, who I am, how do I fit. And then next, the importance of relationships. We've been robbed in a way from the ability for us to have relationships during this season, right? We've been caught up in not being able to see each other, give hugs, high fives. We've had to remove that. Now we're getting back into it in some places around the country where we're able to, see each other and have that social distancing at play. But that's really affected us. And so those two things, relationships and circumstances, really do help us in regards to a stronger mental health or a diminished mental health. Now, to be clear, that is a very general definition. Some of us are dealing with chemical compositions, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, where our brain is struggling because of a neurochemical issue. And it's not so much about circumstances and relationships as it is about the fact that our brain is an organ. It's an incredible organ. It's an incredible instrument, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But before I go any further, let's define the difference between mental health and mental illness. Mental health is, of course, something that we all have, but these things do not mean the same thing. Everyone has mental health, just like everyone has health, but a mental illness is an illness that affects the way people think, feel, behave, or interact with others. Not all people have mental illness, although the argument could be made, just like we all have respiratory illnesses from time to time, just like our bodies can get sick in any way, shape, or form, that perhaps at times we do struggle with mental illness at some level, but at a very small level perhaps. But we don't all have mental illness on a daily basis, but we all have mental health all the time. And that's why this conversation is so important. The trends that we see here in the state of Indiana, we know that 1 in 5 Americans live with a mental health condition. And we know that 1 in 17 Hoosiers right here in the state of Indiana live with a serious mental illness. And most struggle in secret because, again, of something that we call stigma. And today, the desire is for us to get a chance to be able to just a normalized conversation with a guy that I don't have a PhD in neurosurgery, I've neuroscience, neuro anything. I've just done my time to study and learn the importance of this thing within our skull called the brain. The brain is a fascinating thing. And you notice the URL reference there. I'm sharing a lot of information that I've learned in my research about this very important part of our God-given created anatomy. The brain is the most amazing thing. It's this computer that's running everything about us, running our bodies, our heart, our lungs, all of it. And really, experts are calling this the supercomputer that runs everything about who we are. It runs the way, again, that we see ourselves. And like a supercomputer, sometimes it can be susceptible to sickness. It can be susceptible to a virus. And I don't want to offend anybody by saying that, but because it is making all kinds of calculations all the time, it's thinking, it's dreaming, it's a constant state, whether we're aware of it or not. The brain needs to be thought of in such a way that we can keep it healthy. If the brain is the supercomputer, then our life experiences, that's kind of like the software on the computer. And we've learned through the adverse childhood experience study and other very important studies that when we go through difficult experiences, especially as young kids, traumatic experiences of abuse or dealing with things like divorce or other mental illness within our family sphere, that our brain can become affected by that. And so the software can become corrupted to a certain extent. And then the way that we act, the way that we behave, the way that we see ourselves again diminishes. So today, as we have this conversation, it's really important that we understand those two things. And I want to kind of turn this on a dime to focus a bit more on you watching and participating. How would you rate your mental health as a parent as a youth worker, as a pastor, as an other, how would you rate your current situation with mental health? This is what you're saying in regards to that question. It looks like, if we're going to be honest, and I love that you are, a lot of you would say that A and B, that you're struggling. 56% kind of ebbing and flowing back and forth between poor, struggling, and sometimes struggling. 22% saying good, and then 16% saying very good. I'm grateful again for your willingness to share this. And the reason why I asked the question is because I'm convinced that transparency and vulnerability are the ingredients to us lowering the stigma around mental health. I'm convinced that you and I having this conversation today, even though it's through technology and it's anonymous and it's screens and yada, 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 that when you go to your child later on, when you engage that teenager this evening or tomorrow, and you tell them about what you're going through, the struggles that you're having in your life, you will begin to see a bridge of trust built between you and them. And they will see you as a normal person, and they will begin to feel themselves like they can be normal. They can normalize the conversation about mental health. And so I'm so grateful for, again, your honesty in that regard. I mentioned earlier that I've done quite a bit of research, and I find it absolutely fascinating, the deeper dive I make into the incredible leaps in technology and how it's the brain, they say, is the most complex instrument in the universe. This is what the experts say. And yet we've made great strides in the last few years through MRI and through a variety of other technologies. For example, as you look at your screen, this is a wonderful quote. Eric Kandel, he's an MD, a Nobel Prize laureate and professor of brain science at Columbia University, believes it's all about biology, that the brain, of course, this biological organ, all mental processes are brain processes, and therefore all disorders of mental functioning are biological diseases. The brain is the organ of the mind. Where else could mental illness be if not in the brain? What he is saying is that sometimes we've connected mental health or mental illness to behavior. Why do they do that? Why do they act that way? Are they crazy? And that's where it's caused this stigma, this terrible gap between the compassion, the care that we should be providing all people, especially those of us that call ourselves followers of Jesus, and the people that are struggling and not always knowing why they're struggling. And if you're struggling, you know this, that people can't read your mind. They don't know why you're acting the way you're acting. They don't know why you're feeling the way you feel because maybe you've never told them. And even if you have told them, they might still not quite understand it because that's not their experience. Well, what we're now learning, and it seems to make perfect sense, again, as the God of the universe creates this incredibly complex machine called the body, that the brain is just like any other part of the brain. It's organic, and it can become sick. And mental illness is when things within this organic tissue, within this organic brain, yes, it can be shaped by experiences, but it can also just happen because of the organic makeup and the complexity of this supercomputer, not to mention, again, the software, the experiences that we go through. Just as I thought about this and dove deeper, I came across this. This is the former director of the National Institute of Mental Health. Inso believes the diagnosis and treatment of mental illness is today where cardiology was 100 years ago, a century ago. And like cardiology of yesteryear, the field is poised for dramatic transformation, he says. We are really at the cusp of a revolution in the way we think about the brain and behavior, partly because of technological breakthroughs. We're finally able to answer some of the fundamental questions. Now, that quote is actually from a number of years ago, and so much has even been done since then. But I thought it was a fascinating thing that we're making some big strides in science, big strides in technology to understand the brain, understand mental illness. But here is the beauty. We can understand it not because we have PhDs, not because we're experts or clinicians. We can understand it just because we can have conversations about how we're doing. And I'm going to talk about that throughout our time together. But before I do that, go any further, I want to take some time to give you a chance to be able to learn a little bit more about one of our partners, and I've already kind of mentioned them a little bit. So grateful for my friends at the Lutheran Foundation. There's a new initiative that I think is very important for us to understand, and it is the initiative to talk to our kids, not just about mental health, but to talk to our kids about the importance of substance use. So take a look at this, and we're going to be right back right after this.
It may look like your kids aren't listening when you talk to them about drugs, but they are. Get past the body language and have a conversation. It's worth the effort. Need help on how to get started? Go to worththeeffort.org.
So you're going to want to check out worththeeffort.org. It's a new initiative that I'm so excited to be a part of to help you as parents have good, important, meaningful conversations with your children about substance use. We've seen so much danger, so much destruction done. In fact, as I look ahead a little bit here in my presentation, I want to just share this with you just as a side note that we just produced an incredible testimonial of a young man named Nathan. And if you have time later on after we're done here to visit remedylive.com/Nathan, you'll be able to watch his story. It's about a half an hour long. It's a story of a young man, grew up in a Christian family, grew up going to a great Christian school, and yet really struggled with his identity, back to that translation factor. And Nathan shares real candidly about his battle with addiction. And it's going to be a story that we know is going to bring hope to so many people. So you might want to check that out a little bit later here today, just to be able to kind of understand a little bit more what people are going through when it comes to addiction and how we as parents can have conversations with our kids. Well, the question needs to be asked, why do we need to have conversations with our kids about mental health? And I pushed a question out to you and asked you about some of the issues that you're most concerned about. And this is what you said. It looks like anxiety is of concern to you, depression a concern to you, substance abuse at 6%, pornography at 6%. And I'll talk a little bit later on why that's even on the list. Video game addiction, that's also something that's concerning to a lot of parents. And then loneliness, again, at 19%. And perhaps there's some other things that we didn't put on the list that you believe that your child, your teen is struggling with. The reason why we need to have these conversations with our kids about mental health is because they are indeed struggling. I can tell you without any doubt in my mind, as someone who's worked with students for 30 years now and served so many different schools, served in the church, served in so many different venues, that most kids, and I'm not going to give you an exact percentage, but most kids struggle at some point in the journey of adolescence. Between the ages of 12, maybe now even 11, up until 25, it's a really very difficult, treacherous journey for a child, for a teen, a tween, a young adult to make if they don't have the community of very important, trusted adults in their life. Again, includes parents, includes youth workers, includes pastors, it includes those children's workers. You might have worked with the child when he was younger, she was younger, but to re-engage them even as they get older, because the importance of relationship and the importance of having conversations like we're having today is what these students need to have in their lives, because they have been placated, they've been counterfeited, they've been pushed into believing that conversation can't be had. They also believe there's a stigma. It's a bit different. Teens are far more willing to be vulnerable, but they're a little bit more mistrusting to have the conversation because they want to know that the person they're talking to, that trusted adult, really is someone that they can confide in. At Remedy Live, we've used a term a lot called the secret struggle. We use this term for teens, for adults. This is a point of isolating pain in a person's life that threatens their mental health and their overall well-being. And of course, a secret struggle is not something that we talk about. It's something that we've kept in secret, that we've not let anyone know about. And so it's so important that we have people like you that are sitting down and asking the questions of how are you doing. I'm going to talk a bit about that near the end of our time, but it's so super important because secret struggle can manifest in a variety of ways. It can be abuses that kids have gone through, substance use that we talked about earlier, neglect, just feeling like no one cares. We have a lot of students now that are dealing with sexual identity issues, and they just don't know that anyone really cares about who they are, and maybe they even feel neglected because of those concerns in their life. Of course, addiction issues, hopelessness just in general. And so today we're having this conversation because we know that when you don't tell anybody about what you're going through, you struggle and you struggle. And no one can read your mind. No child is able to be aware of how they can get help if they keep everything inside their brain. They need someone like you and I to pull it out of them. And because when they live in their secret struggle, when they live in that struggle that's all on their own, that they've not told anybody, they end up becoming very isolated. And of course, I don't think I need to tell you about isolation. With what we've gone through with COVID-19 and the social isolation and the incredible leap that we've seen in mental illness across America. But the question might be, why is isolation so bad? And again, it's really, really simple for me. And whether you're a Christian, whether you're a person of faith, whether you're an atheist, an agnostic, most experts agree that nobody should be alone. In fact, if you think of the prison system, when you are punished as a prisoner, sometimes you're placed in social isolation to punish you even more. And so we believe that being isolated is a terrible thing, and that's where the brain can become even more unhealthy. And so to step out of our secret struggle and to step into a conversation. Many of you have seen this video I'm about to show you next. One of our wonderful partners, a young lady, a high school student that shared her struggle, her secret struggle and the power of her story. So my privilege to share with you Olivia's story here. And I'm just going to make sure that I can get it for you so I can set this up properly. I'm realizing as I do this that the button that I wanted to click is not there. So hang on with me. This has been the beauty of me doing live presentations on my computer. And I can't find it. So I guess I'm not showing the Olivia video. Welcome to Real-Time Webinar Action, sponsored by Clinton Foppel. Let's jump into the conversation that I wanted to have after that, and that was the conversation about anxiety and depression. Olivia shares quite candidly, and you can see her video on our website at remedylive.com. But let's talk a bit about anxiety. She shares in her video the overwhelming feelings that she goes through. She calls it almost like a monster that she seems to be dealing with on a regular basis that she is up against. And, one of the things that we know when it comes to anxiety is that it manifests with all kinds of different things. It manifests with nervousness. It manifests with feelings of fear, apprehension. And we know that a lot of people, when they get overwhelmed by the current situation we're in with coronavirus, that can be just absolutely awful to have to navigate by themselves. And so we know that so many kids and people, of all ages are dealing with anxiety issues. And that's a form of mental illness that so many kids have today, but we don't often know how to talk about it because I've spoken to so many children and students that don't know how to articulate that they feel overwhelmed. They don't know how to articulate that they feel pressure, that they feel fear of the future. And so that's why it's so critical that you as a loved one, as a trusted adult in their life, needs to come alongside them and share what it is that they're going through. Another definition I want to share with you is that of depression. And this is a working definition that we've developed, that it's like a mind fog. Now, this is not, of course, to be generalized for everybody across the planet, but really for the most of the population that deals with depression, this is like a mind fog characterized by a loss of interest in activities, that regular routine, and this impairment that sometimes we find ourselves in the midst of, where again, our brain cannot make sense always of the situations at hand. And so we find ourselves pulling away from community, pulling away from wanting to talk about those things that we're going through. And so it's so super important that we have a conversation like we're having today, so that you, as a caregiver in a child's life, can say, how are you feeling? How are you doing right now in regards to some of the things you're up against? What we do know now as we think about the brain is these incredible, powerful neurotransmitters. Norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. These are three neurotransmitters that are implicated in depression. And really, I would say that they're also connected to the issue of anxiety. For example, we know that norepinephrine is secreted in response to stress. It's kind of the fight or flight neurochemical. And we know that low levels of this can lead to depression. And we've also learned that it can also lead to anxiety. And why we're sharing this is again, just to affirm, don't always look at someone's behaviors, but do for the symptomatic reasons, but instead look at what's going on within the organic makeup of the illness of the brain or the sickness of the brain so that we can get them the help that they deserve. We know that, for example, with serotonin, this has oftentimes been called the happy neurochemical. This regulates mood and social behavior. This helps with appetite and digestion, sleep, memory, sexual desire, and function. Things that God has given us within that brain of ours to be able to help us to be optimistic, to believe the best for the next day. Really, maybe in some ways, to hope that tomorrow can be better, that tomorrow can be good. But when we see serotonin diminish, of course, we can really struggle with the belief that these things are going to change, that we're going to deal with. And then lastly, the issue of dopamine, the neurochemical dopamine. This is called the reward neurochemical, and it plays a role in how we feel pleasure. It's a big part of our need to think and to plan. It helps us to persevere, to focus, and to find things interesting. And when we think about the brain, we think about the way it's got all of these incredible neural nets and the way that it's connected to each other and the synapses, the way that they fire. It is so hard for us to even fully understand the complexity of the supercomputer. But what we know is that these neurochemicals, these neurotransmitters, they're the ones that are helping us to feel. These are the ones that are helping us to navigate these things that we are going through on a daily basis. And when they diminish, whether they diminish in amount, whether they diminish and become unhealthy, these neurotransmitters, then of course our mental health can decline. And that's why sometimes it's critical for medication to be involved. That sometimes it's always essential for us to talk about it, the power of therapy, and I'm going to actually rescind that statement. The power of conversation. Therapy is sometimes needed, but most often, all the time, we just need to focus on having conversations where we feel like we can be open and honest about these dialogues. Because what we now know in regards to depression increasing and anxiety increasing is the risk that provides to the person who's struggling. We know that depression left untreated, it can lead to thoughts of suicide and to believing that my life isn't worth living, that I don't belong, that I'm not important. Depression can be caused, of course, by sudden changes in relationships, back to the experiences that we have. It can be unhealthy stress, substance abuse, physical health, financial struggle, or biological changes, of course, to our brain. And that is happening between the ages of 11 and 25 at a colossal rate, that change, that biological change to the brain. Isolation is often the natural response, though, sadly, to increase depression. And that's why this conversation is so important. So we're going to do another trivia time. As you look at your screen, suicide is the leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34 in the U.S. Suicide is the blank leading cause, I should say. Is it the first? Is it the second? Is it the third? Or is it the fourth leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34? I never want to be known as the guy that talks about suicide, but there's nothing that's more grieving to me than watching a life unlived, a life missed from the chance to be able to have an opportunity to be able to maximize their one life. And it looks like, as we see the answer to that question, we know that this is a major issue for us here in America that we need to talk about, and we need to have this conversation. I'm committed to making sure that you also know that lesbian, gay, and bisexual students are really at risk here more than ever. And we as the church, we as faith, people of faith, even though we believe the Bible to be true cover to cover and we've got our convictions about what it says, we should never err on the side of love. they are far more likely to take their lives if we don't engage them and show them the love of Christ, and to engage them in a conversation about their value and what it means to trust in God. And of course, we know that they're 4 times more likely to take their life. And that's incredibly discouraging to me, because I just know that so many of the clients that we serve in our 24-hour chat center at Remedy Live, and the students that we talk to at the school events that we do, that they are indeed struggling. And so, today we know that we have to have this conversation, because we have to understand that how many people, they struggle in secret. The question here is, what % of people who die by suicide had shown symptoms of a mental health condition according to their family and friends, but perhaps their family and friends didn't engage, didn't do anything about it. And again, this is why we're having this conversation today, so that we can indeed have an engagement opportunity for us to be able to dialogue about this. And so, believe it or not, 90% of people who die by suicide had shown those symptoms. And so we're so, passionate about this at Remedy Live, to have this conversation, to make sure that we're having this dialogue about this, because we care so deeply for the young people that we have in our midst, but we care now in regards to all people, because we know that at different stages of life, we can really, really struggle. Well, I'm going to take a bit of a break. I'm going to come back, and I want to take a look now more at what the scriptures say about mental health, and how God lays out throughout His Word really just some amazing ways for us to see ourselves in the midst of the stories. So be right back right after this.
It may look like your kids aren't listening when you talk to them about drugs, but they are. Get past the body language and have a conversation. It's worth the effort. Need help on how to get started? Go to worththeeffort.org.
Hi, I'm Clinton Fopple, the Executive Director and Co-Founder of Remedy Live, creators of the Get School Tour. The Get School Tour is a 1-hour, high-energy event that includes engaging entertainers,
is to know how we can do that. And so these next few polling questions that I want to ask you are in regards to the importance of these relationships that you have with the kids that you serve. And, I just want to fire this up with our first question about, have you taken the steps? Have you taken the next necessary steps to have a conversation with your child, with your teen about mental health? And you hopefully have, but if you haven't, again, today is meant to be an encouragement to you to indeed do that. It looks like a lot of you have, and that's fantastic, but we would know that 17% of you, and some of you are unsure if you've had it, that we today, even if we have had the conversation, we need to continue it. We need to continue to have this dialogue with our children, with the kids that we have relationship with, because they're just too important to us not to have this dialogue. We just absolutely know, for example, that when a child is struggling, and when they struggle again with mental health issues, they sometimes believe that they're the only ones experiencing this. They're the only ones feeling this. And then again, as I said earlier, sometimes they don't even know how to communicate that which they are feeling. They don't know how to communicate that which they are going through, what they are dealing with. And so again, so super important that we have this conversation today, so that you can have the conversation with your child. As I look throughout the scriptures, I see a lot of incredible heroes of the faith. David was troubled and battling deep despair. It says in the Psalm 38, my guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. Psalm 42 says, why are you downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me? We see where Elijah struggled as well, discouraged, weary, and afraid. I've had enough, Lord, he said, take my life. Take my life. Like, look at this. Take my life. I'm not better than my ancestors. 1 Kings. We see these heroes of the faith that have brought us closer to understanding who the Lord is and helping us to be able to know who God is. But we've not always seen the confessions
of what they go through in regards to the struggles of their mental health. And so today, as we talk about this, we can see that there are so many incredible examples throughout the scriptures where this is clear. Jonah was angry and wanted to run away. Now, O Lord, take my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. And even after God reached out to Jonah again with great compassion, he responded, I am angry enough to die. Look at that. I am angry enough to die. And then we see further, of course, we know the story of Job. What a difficult situation with Job just being just all kinds of struggle around him. Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. I loathe for my very life. Therefore, I would give free rein to my complaint and speak out in the bitterness of my soul. And then the weeping prophet Jeremiah wrestled with great loneliness, feelings of defeat and insecurity. Cursed be the day I was born. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow, to end my days in shame? These texts of Scripture, these places within God's Word, where we see these characters, again, that we've read about and learned about as children, and stories that have become so real to us, perhaps we've missed the fact that so many of them were in anguish. And although as we see their confessions of struggle and even thoughts of not wanting to live anymore, they turned to the God of the universe and asked for a renewal of the mind, for help and support during a difficult time. And one of my passions, and you've met Dennis earlier on, one of our passions is that we would engage the church, engage this gathering of adults, this important gathering that we have every week, that we engage the church in a conversation about the importance of mental health. And so the next question I have for you is, how often has your church spoken directly about mental health in your main worship service? How often has that conversation come up, again, in the main worship service? I love workshops, and I love things like these Wired X events that we see occasionally, but how often have you seen this occur within the main worship service? And as you look at your answers coming in, there's occasional responses, and I love that at least it's woven in to a regular experience. A lot of you say never. And then some of you would say often, which is great. And again, if nothing else, whether you're a pastor or whether you're a lay leader, of course, if you're a member, attendee of a church, that you would take upon yourself not only to care for the children and the teens and the tweens, but to care for one another, and to do all that you can to make sure that you're helping one another deal with the struggles that we come up against, these mental health struggles. Again, that's how we lower the stigma, is we lower the stigma by having normal everyday conversations about how we're really doing. And we don't always need to have answers. We don't even need to have solutions or remedies right there and then. We just need to have the freedom to confess what's going on in here, to get it out, what we've struggled with within. And so it's absolutely essential that we do that. The number one thing that we all agree that helps is that we need to talk about it with someone that can help. And I just want to take some time here to mention that, if you've never been to lookupindiana.org, you need to visit the website. It's a wonderful resource. You type in your zip code, and it gives you an opportunity to be able to see different resource centers, counseling centers, therapeutic opportunities. Those are already available for you. But I would also just make sure it's clear that those resources are there for us and they're easy to find, that the more important thing is that we just need to talk about this. And it starts with you and I being vulnerable and being willing to share these things, to get these things off of our chest, to be able to share it in such a way that we can watch the children, the teens, the people that we have life with, know that it's okay to not be okay sometimes, to be honest about those things. I absolutely love the way that the trend is moving. And of course, this is a secular website, Seize the Awkward, but they've done a great job of just helping us to be able to understand how we can talk about these awkward conversations in such a way that we can kind of seize it and jump into it in such a way where we can kind of remove the awkward and have normal conversations about what it looks like to talk during tough times and what it looks like to have conversations with one another. Now, this, again, is a secular, website, and not all of it's going to probably jive with a biblical worldview, but it does give some great tips and some tools on how to have conversations about this. In fact, what I absolutely love is like this next video where it helps us understand how to have the conversation.
How to start that conversation with your friend about their mental health. First, make sure you aren't too far away. Closer. Closer. Whoa, too close. Now ask something open-ended like, you all good?
Are you all good?
Or is everything okay?
Is everything okay?
Well done, awkward teenage actor.
Actually, no. Thanks for asking.
Scroll on for more ways to start the conversation.
I know we make it so complicated, don't we? How do I help? How do I do? What do I do? It all starts with what we just watched. In fact, at Remedy, we've been committed to this for a number of years, the power of the question, how are you? In fact, I would say that the question, how are you, is a question that we've really mutilated because we don't often care for the answer. We don't often take the time needed to hear the response. And so I would encourage you as a step following our time together today is to embrace the question, how are you, and mean it. Ask the question, how are you, and actually take the time needed to hear the person's response. I share this story a lot, but I was at a movie theater with my wife. We were going in for a date night, and I asked the young man that worked there how he was doing. And I could tell, he wasn't kind of there with me. And I said, seriously, how you doing? And he kind of physically almost moved back because he was so shaken by my question a second time. And I won't share what he responded with because it's actually not rated G. But my point is that it was me asking that question and then spending the time to hear the answer that allowed us to have a conversation. And that's what we need to do. We need to recognize that we need to ask, how are you? And truly mean it. We need to move past the I'm fine and into the real stuff. Now, sometimes we are fine, but to know that we have permission to say, you know what, I'm just not doing that great right now. And if you could help me talk about this, that would be super, super cool right now because I'm dealing with this. Well, we are almost done here. Got another question for you here as you look at your screen, and I want to ask you again which best applies to you as you think about your current situation with mental illness specifically. And this is a bit of a teachable moment for us today because as I've traversed this, I'm an ordained pastor, and I've traversed this conversation. I know that a lot of people they look at mental illness through a variety of different lenses. And some see mental illness as a sin. Some people see mental illness as a sickness. And as you answer the question, nearly all of you see mental illness as a sickness. And here's where I'm going to take a bit of a turn. I'm going to say that I think it's more of the answer C. And I'll tell you why I think it's a sin. It's not a sin because I'm committing some awful thing by having an organic part of my body become sick. It's a sin because I choose not to care for myself and love myself as a created child of God, as a manufactured piece of art. And so it's a sin that we don't talk about it. It's a sin that I don't confess it, but it's a sickness in that my mind is becoming unhealthy. And so I think it's both. And I think, church, we really need to do all that we can to be able to have a conversation today with the children, with the kids, but even with one another in such a way that we can get to the bottom of some of the situations that we find the people that we love in the midst of. And so as we conclude our time, what I want to do is I want to see if you were paying attention. We'll have one final trivia time. I'll give you a chance to be able to win perhaps another gift card from Remedy Live. But I just want to see if indeed this was a benefit to you. So here's our first question to see if you were paying attention to the question in regards to the suicide rate among 10 to 14-year-olds. And, what we know is that this has become a major issue within our country. We know that for so many younger and younger kids, believe it or not, it has, and I'm just going to tell you, it's tripled among young people in that age group where they now are struggling and taking their own lives. And that's why it's absolutely so critical for us today that we're having this conversation, because we can stand the gap and we can help people, young people, live their life to the full, and to be able to navigate these situations. The next question I had for you is in regards to the neurotransmitters we talked about. Which neurotransmitter is called the reward neurochemical? It's important for us all to understand that the brain is, yes, incredibly complex, but we don't need to have PhDs to understand that there's a lot going on there chemically that we need to be aware of, and that behavior and the things that we see people do shouldn't be something that we measure and judge, because something is going wrong from the illness side, the physical, organic side, that we need to be more appreciative of and supportive of. And so we need to have this conversation in regards to that to make sure that we can help people get the services they need. And then lastly, what is one thing we can all do to serve our children? And this is kind of probably a trick question, but it's meant to be an encouragement as well to us. We can get them better smartphones, or we can let them watch YouTube. We can blame others. We can ask them, how are you? And mean it. And of course, that's for all people, that we can do D. We can actually ask each other how we're doing and really, really mean that. So, my hope is that today has been a benefit to you, an encouragement to you, to support you in your journey as a parent, as a youth worker, as someone who's working with students, and working with children. But I also hope it's a benefit to you, because I'm committed to helping all people know that they're not alone, that we're in this together, that we all matter, and that we're all indeed created in the image of God, and we deserve to be cared for. We deserve to be loved, and we definitely deserve to be in community. And there is hope, and there is help. And mental health as a general situation in our culture is being talked about more, but we can do so much more. And so just help us today by giving us a rating of how you felt things went in our experience. And thank you so much. This is kind of a beta test still of a webinar format that we're putting together. This webinar tool that you've been using has been created by us to engage you in an anonymous way. But I hope this has been of benefit to you. I do want to mention to you, as we take our time here at the end, that we do have the ability. I am a Train the Trainer. I can take your church, your organization through QPR training. And of course, QPR training is one of the best ways to educate an organization about how to ask the right questions, how to persuade someone and refer someone into care. And if you want to learn more about QPR training from Remedy Live, you can text the word QPR to 494949, or simply visit our website at remedylive.com/QPR. So again, I also want to let you know that we've got a variety of service tools that can help you. The Wired podcast is available on our website. Great leaders talking about the importance of mental health. And we're so excited about their support in helping us do what we do. So, on behalf of Remedy Live, thank you so much for making time. We're going a little bit over here today, but thank you for making time about this important conversation. Let us know if we can serve you, if we can bring a Wired experience your way, virtually or in person, when we get back to doing that. And just God bless you in this season as you engage the kids, the children that are in your life. God bless you.